Thanks, guys, so much. How are we doing? We're all right? Lovely to see you all. Just to say, if you are new here, a very, very special welcome. We've got some cards at the back, which if you'd like to be on our mailing list and find out news and updates of church life and what we've got planned coming up, then do jot your details down there. We've also got a church suite system, an app, where you can keep up to date as well. So just encourage you to do that. But great to have you with us. As Claire said, we've just come back from lovely, 12 days in Italy. We certainly feel rested. I'll try not to fill in too many illustrations connected to olive oil and lovely wine and beautiful vistas. But I do want to talk a little bit about rest this morning. Rest, something I find very hard to do. But we're going to close off our summer preaching series in the Psalms with possibly the best known and perhaps the best loved psalm of all, Psalm 23. This is often the go-to psalm at funerals, or the psalm we dip into when times are hard and we're just needing some comfort, some reassurance. But I'd like to suggest that actually this is a blueprint, really, for how we should live our lives every single day. Every single day. And I believe this psalm speaks volumes to us, particularly at this time of year as summer's beginning to draw to a close and the September term is looming. The new academic year, it's often thought of as the busiest term. And the reason why I wanted to finish on this is because so often we can kind of switch gear into busy mode, get stuck into the September term, work our socks off and crash at Christmas. We're not called to strive. We're not called to constantly dig deep into our own reserves, trust and depend on our own abilities and our strength to get us through. We're actually called to work from a place of inner rest. A place of inner rest. We're called to serve and work from a place of not self-confidence, but confidence in God. Not from self-reliance, but actually dependence on Him. To work from a place of rest. How do we carry rest? You might not have got a rest over the summer period. You might be looking forward to it. Maybe you've got the luxury of being able to take holidays outside of school times. Maybe you just haven't been able to have a holiday for a long, long time. But God's rest is for all of us. It's for all of us. We did a whole series on rest a few years ago. If you were with us, you might remember. But one thing I do remember is how challenging or how challenged I was when we looked at the traditional Jewish calendar and the Jewish week. The fact that it starts with Sabbath. It starts with rest. Or more specifically, it starts with a meal on the Friday evening at sundown. That's when their week starts. We're going to start with a meal, and then we're going to go to sleep. That is a mind shift to how our weeks usually start, with the Monday morning alarm clock ringing off and us slamming it down, trying to get away with as many snoozes as we can before we are going to be late. And then we stumble into the shower, and then we just get into the working week, and we crash at the weekend. Very different mindset. Burning the candles at both ends and then crashing. That is resting from a place of exhaustion rather than working from a place of rest. Very different mindset. And I think the former, the Jewish traditional week, starting with Sabbath, starting with rest, is actually a very powerful statement of trust in God. God, whatever this new week brings, or we could say whatever this new term brings, I'm going to rest in you and trust that you've got this. You've got this. I'm going to start with a meal with my friends or family. I'm going to go to sleep, safe in the knowledge that I'm resting in your care. It's a different mindset, isn't it? And here in this psalm, in Psalm 23, a psalm of David, we see his same trust and dependence on God with this beautiful imagery of a shepherd caring for his flock. It's a familiar theme. You see it throughout Scripture. Shepherd caring for his flocks. Jesus himself said in John 10, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep know me. And so this morning, I just want us to go through this well-known passage, this well-known psalm, slowly. We can get so familiar with words, can't we? They can just kind of roll off our tongue. Let's go through this line by line. Let's start together with verse 1. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing, or I shall not want, as some translations say. That is a statement of absolute trust and certainty that Jesus, our good shepherd, will provide everything we need. All that we need is found in him. That is an incredible statement. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. In a world that celebrates, certainly orientated to, independency and self-sufficiency, simply declaring that I'm a sheep that needs a shepherd is a pretty big statement. We don't want to be sheep. We want to be the shepherd. We want to be taking the lead. We want to be calling the shots. So to say the Lord is my shepherd, that in itself is a powerful statement. But then add, and I lack nothing. That's about as countercultural as you can get in a culture that is constantly geared up to wanting new and brighter and better and shinier. It is completely countercultural. It almost sounds crazy. I've got what I need. Who says that? Almost sounds crazy unless, that is, you know the shepherd. If you know the shepherd, then it all makes sense. So what type of shepherd are we talking about? What type of shepherd is Jesus? Well, let's read on. Verse 2. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. This is a shepherd who restores us, who refreshes us, who gives us rest. This is not a shepherd who drives you hard. See how much you've got. No, he leads us well. Sheep aren't driven. We don't need a cowboy to drive us. We need a shepherd to lead us. And he leads us well. Our shepherd is never rushed. He's never taken by surprise. He is Jehovah Shalom. He is our peace. He's our peace. He's Jehovah Rapha. He's the Lord who heals and restores. He restores my soul. This is the type of shepherd that we have. In him we find our soul rest. Do you need soul rest this morning? There's one place you can find it. It's in Jesus, our good shepherd. And this is such an important lesson to learn, particularly if you're like me and find it hard to switch off. You know, even whilst I was on holiday, I was constantly planning routes, finding places to visit. It's kind of the downside of having mobile data and Wi-Fi. In fact, the benefit of us being in a remote location was the Wi-Fi was a bit intermittent. I was forced to lie down in green pastures. Sometimes God needs to force us to stop. But I find it hard to switch off. I find it hard to rest. I know it's a weakness in me. Perhaps it's a weakness in you too. But the truth is, we often struggle to rest because we struggle to trust. Ouch. It's a painful truth. And I actually preached on this very passage back in 2015. If my memory serves me correctly, it was the very first preach we did in this hall when we were running services from this place after we refurbished it. But God was taking me through some real lessons in learning to rest in Him. Sometimes they were painful lessons. And I'm still learning those lessons. But back then, I realized that often our reticence to rest in God is usually found in one of four areas. And they're not very attractive areas. We can struggle to rest in God because we can carry a sense of lack in ourselves. In other words, we're saying, I don't have enough. It's the very opposite to what David is stating in this psalm. Instead of the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing, it's basically we're saying, I don't have enough. So we feel we have to work harder, to earn more, to accumulate more stuff. Our security is more in our stuff. Our identity is more in our stuff. When God looks at us, He doesn't look at our stuff. He looks at our hearts. We can have this sense of lack, and even if we're not in a place of lack, there can be this fear that I might end up back in a place of lack, so I've still got to work hard and earn hard and accumulate more stuff. We can struggle to rest because of a sense of lack. I don't have enough. Or we can struggle to rest because we're always trying to gain approval. We have this deep-seated sense of, I need to be wanted. I need to feel needed. It sounds very important when people ask you, how are you doing? Oh, I'm exhausted. I'm so busy. Wow, you must be really important. We can struggle to rest because basically what we're saying is, I'm not enough. I need to do. I need to be busy. Thirdly, we can struggle to rest because actually we don't trust others to get the job done. In effect, what we're saying is, they're not enough. I'm always having to intervene and interfere to make sure things are done my way, because obviously my way is the best way. And so we're always busy. I'm always having to fill the gaps. I can't let this drop. As I said, in essence, we're saying, I don't think you're enough. Or, fourthly, we can struggle to rest because we're just constantly trying to impress God. We don't feel worthy unless we're doing great exploits for God or feeling like we're accomplishing something for Him. The bottom line is, apart from not understanding the gospel of grace, we're actually saying, Jesus, I don't think you're enough. I'm constantly having to add to your finished work. I don't know about you. None of those sound very good positions to be in. I don't have enough. I'm not enough. You're not enough. Jesus is not enough. It's kind of what we're saying when we struggle to rest and say, over to you, Lord. I'm going to rest in you. It takes trust to rest. It takes trust to rest. Trust in the shepherd to lead you to green pastures, to lead you to the right sources of refreshment. There's plenty of sources of refreshment that promise so much and deliver so little. Our good shepherd knows the right sources of refreshment. And as I said, sometimes God needs to make us stop in our tracks sometimes, to make us lie down. Notice who's doing all the action. It's not us, it's our good shepherd. He makes me lie down. He leads me beside still waters. It's all in him. And as we stay close to the shepherd, the one who knows exactly what we need in and out of every season, we can know a deep soul rest. St. Augustine famously said, "Our heart is restless until it rests in you." Do you have a restless heart this morning? There is a home for restless hearts. It's in Jesus, our good shepherd. And maybe as we start this new term, maybe your mind's already thinking about back to work, back to college, back to school, whatever your situation is. Maybe God is calling you to trust him enough to rest in his grace, in his provision, in his enabling, in his resources, in his equipping. He's got this. He's got this. He's a shepherd who restores us. Secondly, we read he's a shepherd who guides us. Verse 3, he guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Notice how David's now getting personal. He's not talking about the shepherd. He's now talking directly to the shepherd. You are with me. This is about relationship. This is about closeness. As I said, we just come back from Italy, and we were in a remote area, and in fact, the only traffic holdup we had was a sheep jam. It was a sheep. There we go. I think we've got a photo of it. There we go. We were in the white car behind. And I don't know how long we were there for, but there we see this shepherd carefully guiding his flock from one pasture to another pasture. They probably do this every single day or at least twice a day. But still, the sheep were concerned. Some of the sheep were a bit startled by the vehicles, going, "What are you doing here? You look dangerous." They were a little bit stopped and startled. And sometimes we can feel intimidated by change. I liked it in that pasture. What's the shepherd doing? This looks dangerous. We can be startled by change or just simply the unknown. We've faced so much of that over the last few years, and we're facing it again. Cost of living crisis, etc. There is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknown. And our response can be to the shepherd, "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" Some of the sheep started nibbling on the grass verges and going up the road a little bit. How easily do we get distracted with the tempting and the new? "Oh, this looks good," and go off on a tangent. But all it took for both of these groups of sheep was the gentle, calming voice of the shepherd. You could see his staff was just guiding them through, going, "Come on, this way," and they all followed through. This isn't some scene of a dog snapping at their heels, panicking them into position. No, it was the calming and comforting voice of the shepherd, this reassurance guiding them through. And notice when we read this, that being guided along the right paths does not mean we avoid dark valleys. The dark valley is part of the right path. It's really important we get this. Maybe you're going through a dark valley moment. Maybe you're thinking, "This can't be right. This can't be right." What is the shepherd thinking about? Maybe you're even going through the valley of the shadow of death. You're thinking, "This is not right. God, where are you? Where are you in this?" And yet, God's word says, even there, I will fear no evil. Why? For the simple reason, you are with me. You are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. We do not need to be paralyzed by fear because of the presence of the shepherd. We might not see him. Sheep don't have very good eyesight. But Jesus said, my sheep know my voice. Listen out for his voice. He is there. He is with you. And we don't have to fear simply because he's beside us. We also do not need to fear because he's already gone ahead of us, even through death itself. And I think sometimes when we come to Psalms and we dip in and out, we can kind of forget how they're connected together. And I think sometimes we can forget that Psalm 23 comes straight after Psalm 22. There's nothing unusual in that. That sounds very logical. But if you remember, Psalm 22 is a prophetic psalm of David's about the shepherd laying down his life for his sheep. In fact, Psalm 22, 23, and 24 form a beautiful trilogy about Jesus. Psalm 22, all about Jesus giving his life for his sheep. Psalm 23, as we've been seeing, it's all about Jesus caring and guiding for his sheep. Psalm 24 is all about Jesus coming back victorious for his sheep. So just before we have this tranquil, the Lord is my shepherd in Psalm 23, we have, my God, why have you forsaken me? In Psalm 22. The very words, of course, Jesus cried out when he was hanging on the cross. Psalm 22 goes on to basically give a description of crucifixion, 1,000 years before the event. Verse 16, they pierce my hands and my feet. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment. Sounds familiar. This isn't David's testimony. This is him prophesying years before about Jesus, the good shepherd, laying his life down for his sheep. Again, back in John 10, Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays his life down for his sheep. The only reason we do not need to fear the dark valleys, the valley of the shadow of death, is because our good shepherd has already gone before and defeated death itself, has defeated evil. That's the only reason we can rest and know his provision and his grace, because he bore the punishment that we deserved, so that we might be clothed in his righteousness, so that we might walk free. That is why we don't need to fear. He is beside us in the present, but he's already gone before us. He's already gone before us. He has defeated sin, hell, and death. What a shepherd. What a shepherd. What a savior. Our good shepherd willingly became the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world. So, as you reflect on Psalm 23, don't forget it's only because of Psalm 22. The only reason we can know such comfort and such peace is that our good shepherd laid down his life for us. That means you can trust in his guidance. You can trust that he is committed to you. He will not run off like a hired hand, as Jesus goes on to say in John 10. Why? Because we're his. He's not a hired hand. We are the sheep of his pasture. It says in Psalm 100. We're bought at an incredible cost. His own precious blood. You can trust in his guidance. You can trust in his commitment to you. You're his. He will never, ever leave you. If you're going through a dark valley moment this morning, I just pray right now that you will get a fresh revelation of his love and of his commitment to you, that you will know his presence with you right now, more keenly than you have ever felt before, that you will hear the shepherd's voice saying, this is the way, keep walking, I'm with you. And I pray that your testimony will be David's testimony. I will fear no evil because you are with me, because you are with me. Your staff is there to guide me. Your rod is there to deflect any attack that might come against me. The rod was the shepherd's offensive weapon to beat off the bears and the wolves. We don't walk through alone. We don't walk through defenseless. Our shepherd is with us, guiding you. He is also, as we read on in verse 5, a shepherd who provides. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. I just love the imagery here, because this is not saying that God will come through to you once the battle's done. One day you will be able to celebrate. No, what this is saying is you can know the provision and the favor and the hospitality of God right in the midst of the battle. Even when you're surrounded by your enemies, even when circumstances haven't changed one jot, I can know God's hospitality. I can know his favor. I can know his presence. He invites me to his table. That in itself is amazing. We were once objects of wrath. Thanks to Jesus, the Good Shepherd, laying his life down for his sheep, we are now invited to his table. Not just servants, not just picking up the crumbs, but as honored guests. In that culture, if you were an honored guest, you would have your head anointed with scented oils, just cleaning the sweat and the smell of the day off you. They would make sure that your cup was always full. You knew when it was time to leave when the cup stopped being filled. It was a subtle hint. But notice here, there's no stop to this cup. We are always welcome. There is no end to God's hospitality. This cup isn't just filled for a time, it overflows. Just a picture of God's abundance. Some people say, commentators say, there seems to be a shift away from the shepherd picture. But actually, oil for a shepherd and a sheep was really important too. During rutting season, shepherds used to coat the ram's horns and head with oil so they wouldn't damage each other too much. They would glance off. Sometimes we need oil to soothe the battle scars that we face. Sometimes we knock heads with each other. The Holy Spirit pours oil on those wounds, soothes them. But sheep also were anointed with oil to stop the flies and the ticks. They would pour oil over their heads and their coats, particularly around their noses, to stop the flies getting in there. And so often, what gets us down is not necessarily the big things. It's just the little niggles, the disappointments, the irritants. Just gets us down. God's oil is there to soothe and to heal and to bring respite from all that irritates us. It's just a beautiful image of care and generosity and God's abundance. Just picture that. That is ours, even in the battle. You know, I love testimonies when people come up. I love testimonies all the time. But you know what? I love testimonies particularly when people are saying, I'm still in the battle. I haven't yet come through the other side, but I just want to testify about God's peace. I just feel such peace. Or God has just been so close to me through this situation. I just want to give thanks. I just know him at a deeper level. You know, that is just as powerful a testimony as God's brought me through. God's healed me. It's that testimony of God's hospitality and care in the battle, surrounded by our enemies. That's a powerful testimony. And a lot of commentators agree that actually this psalm was written later on in David's life. Often we think of David, a young shepherd boy, lying in the fields, writing Psalm 23. Most commentators suggest it was later, much later on in David's life, when he was king, and quite possibly when he was being hunted down by his own son, Absalom. David had many enemies. Kind of hurts a lot more when it's your own family hunting you down. He had a pretty dysfunctional family. I mean, in no small part to his own mistakes. But it's very poignant. This is someone who has lived life, who has known battles from outside and from inside. He has known weariness, he has known hardship. But right here, even in this difficult place, where he could lose everything, even his life, he knew God's hospitality and God's care. Maybe you could do with some care from the shepherd. 1,000 years later, Jesus would stand up in front of a huge crowd. He said he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. What did he do? He took 5 loaves, 2 fish, and fed over 5,000 of them. And there was 12 basketfuls of leftovers. Again, just a beautiful measure of our good shepherd's abundance and care. He has compassion. He cares for you. He is a good shepherd who provides. And I think this particularly speaks volumes to us at a time, as I said, cost of living has reached crisis point for many. Just had another so-called price cap being raised. I don't remember a time where there's been so much uncertainty about the future. As a church, we're going to be looking more at how we can help people through this, both our community and each other, practically. Maybe I'll talk more about that next week. But I've been dipping into a book called A Non-Anxious Presence by an Australian pastor and author called Mark Sayers. And he says globally, we are in what he describes as a gray zone. A gray zone. It's a military term. It's a kind of a period of instability. You're not in peace. You're not in war. You're in a gray zone. It's a period of uncertainty globally. And it's hardly surprising, coming off the back of a pandemic, we've got wars, we've got cost of living crisis. He says many are living in a climate of anxiety. And we need to recognize that. And yet Mark goes on to encourage us, rather than giving in to anxiety, to actually allow God to shape us through the challenges. In fact, he uses David as an illustration, how God prepared him as a young shepherd boy for kingship, to be king. How if we allow God to shape us through the challenges, and knowing that we can completely trust in him, our good shepherd, then what that does is we start to become a non-anxious presence to those around us. As we place our trust and our dependency on God, on his faithfulness, on his goodness, on his provision, that he is our good shepherd, I shall not want, then we ourselves become pointers to the good shepherd. He says this is an amazing opportunity. How can we impact our community? By being a non-anxious presence in a climate of anxiety. It's an opportunity. If we model what we're reading in this psalm, if we model what David got, we will be those that point to the one who restores us, who guides us, who provides for us, and who never, ever leaves us. Finally, verse 6, surely your goodness and love or mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. What a beautiful verse that is. What a verse of absolute assurance. As we've been singing about, don't you just love the fact that we don't have to chase after God for his goodness, for his mercy, for his love? So we've been singing about he pursues us. His goodness, his mercy, his love pursues us. You cannot outrun God's mercy and grace. Sometimes we try very hard to. You cannot outrun God's mercy and his grace. And to top it all off, we have this assurance that our shepherd will bring us ultimately home. Home. So, as we head into this potentially very busy term, can I just encourage you? Rest. Rest in his care. Rest in his strength. Rest in his guidance and in his provision. And rest in the eternal hope that we have in him. Yes, this is a very personal psalm. But as we take this truth to heart, as we live out this psalm every day of our lives, I believe we will have a huge impact on those around us. And we'll be able to point others to the Good Shepherd, our refuge, our strength, our ever-present help in times of trouble. I just invite the band to come back. I'd love us just to spend some time worshiping. But as they get themselves ready, I just invite you to read this psalm out aloud together. Would you do that this morning? I don't know what you're facing. I don't know what you've got coming up in this next term. Maybe it's new school year. Maybe it's new job. Maybe it's the same old, same old. But make this your declaration. Make this your prayer. Make it a declaration of trust in the one who has already gone before and who walks with you every step of the way. So can I invite you to stand, and we're going to read through this psalm together. The words should hopefully come up on the screen. There they are. I think this is in the NIV version. I actually have slightly different version. I'll try and match it just so we don't have a train wreck. Let's read this together, okay? The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Amen. Let's worship him, shall we?
Could we